I think, there we are. Oh,
Hello?
just.
Hello? Are we back? Hey!
The interview is done.
It was a great interview. You should have been there, guys. Um, I think I was in the middle of trying to introduce Ory and tell you how amazing she is. Sorry for the interruption. Um, somebody came from the events team and tried to explain to me that there was a power cut. I'm from Lagos. You don't need to explain to me there's a power cut. And on we go. Ory, like I said, we're excited to have you here. We're very excited because of the work you've done in social media. You've been a social media pioneer, particularly your work in political activism, in raising awareness. It's been inspiring. So I wanted us to talk first of all about social activism and just to just hear from you in your words what it is that you, when you're out there, you're probably not out there, you're probably at home, sending those tweets about things that are going on in Kenya or around Africa, things that you are passionate about or that you care about. What difference do you think tweeting about it makes? I just want to hear it in your own words.
So those who followed me, and sorry, I have braces, I've just had surgery, I'm lisping, it's my first time doing an event.
Thank you.
My jaw was wired shut for about 5 weeks, so I'm learning how to talk and eat. I have a lot of respect for Kanye West, who did his album while he was wired. I wanted to die when I was wired, so excuse me if I'm not as clear as I normally am. But those who followed me for a long time, since when I used to blog and then now Twitter or whatever will be next, I think what's always clear is I've never done social media or tech with a broader agenda beyond writing about things that I personally care about. And I think that animates, that drives, that's very clear. Maybe that's why I've been able to build a consistent audience, because if you follow me long enough, you realize that there's an authenticity around that beyond trying to position or posture myself for something. So it starts off as what I care about. Two, particularly as a woman, speaking about politics, I found there was a huge assumption around what spaces women could play with around politics, around power, around opinions, around strong opinions. When I used to blog, this was before avatars and people didn't really know how I looked, and everyone assumed I was a man. And I remember like, great point, Mr. Okolloh, and I'm like, no. And I think sort of disrupting or building a strong voice as a woman became something I cared about. And finally, and Boniface alluded to this earlier, this idea that I didn't need a vector to channel my ideas. People always ask me, why don't you write a column in the newspaper now? You could reach so many people, you're strong. And I always found whenever I did interviews, whenever I tried to write a piece, it would just get edited out into something that was not really...
Editors are terrible.
You should know. Where's the Quartz Africa stuff, yeah? And so, it was a way that I could just communicate directly. And finally, believe it or not, I'm an introvert. So the idea of communicating at a distance is fantastic. Now that I'm back in Nairobi and people meet me all the time and they're like, hey, I'll be at Nakumat, they're like, I follow you, Kenyan Pundit. I can see everyone is always underwhelmed when they meet me because they're like, we thought you're so loud and, this larger than life personality. But I think it's a way for me to connect without really connecting. So it's a very personal journey. That it ends up in other things has been
Right.
a plus. But for me, it's always about me and my voice and things that I care about.
I mean, although I'd followed you for a while, I think the first time we connected was around 147 is not a number. I mean, I don't think I've heard you speak about that. Clearly there's a human empathy to it, but I think it'd be interesting to hear in your own words how that came about, what you were thinking, what you were trying to achieve with that hashtag and the awareness.
So I've deliberately tried not to speak about that hashtag, how it came about, because I never wanted the story to be about me and creating.
Right, I understand that.
So even now, I'll dodge it, kind of. But I think it was a culmination. Again, those who followed me for a while noticed that my tone on Twitter in particular changed around Westgate and the persistent terror attacks that we're facing. Not because it's a serious problem, it is, but it encapsulates so many things that are wrong with Kenya and what we're accepting to deal with.
Right.
At a very fundamental way. And I think we struggle to make the connections between corruption, bad governance, leaders who don't care. And yes, terrorism is a global threat. Attacks happen everywhere. But there's a way in which we're responding in Kenya that just doesn't add up. And I think by the time Garissa happened, and when it was juxtaposed, because I was equally angry about, Westgate and Peketonian, but there was a way you could tell that because these were students and parents in an area that no one really cared about, and that no one really connected, and that it was much more severe than anything we had gone through, and that they were just being called students. Some students were killed. I wondered maybe if we personalized that story, and they were not just a number, would we feel a little bit more? Would we care a little bit more? Would we question a little bit more why we're sitting ducks, and why we're being hit constantly, which happens, but why we're not responding. So I never did any interviews. Everyone contacted me because I wanted the story to be about the individuals who are affected and that our lack of response to that story. And, there was a case, there's a family that's still looking for their daughter. We're having prayer rallies, 2 in a row this weekend. We never had a memorial service for Garissa. And it's these things that, thinking as a parent, as a mother, if I'm fortunate, I can maybe send my kids to the school that I want. Many of the students in Garissa were there because they couldn't afford school fees at any of the other public universities. And there was just, for me, it encapsulated this 2 Kenyas in such a powerful and a painful way. And I thought the least I could do was, maybe they were not just a number, and there were people who mattered to somebody.
Without intending, to celebrate the success of how many retweets or whatever, what kind of impact, what kind of response did it have? Do you think it really had an impact in terms of raising awareness, getting people to think about this in the way you talk about it?
So in a broader sense, like I said, if I look at the issues we're still grappling with, those who watched Nation this weekend, the conditions under which our soldiers and police are working under. Sort of this, nothing has changed in that sense. But I'd like to think, and a lot of parents reached out to us and said, thank you, that there was a name, that there was a face.
Yes,
I think the fact that all the media then took it on in the bios, in the major newspapers. I was working with a lot of foreign journalists, Draz is one of them here, Hannah McNish, who are actually sitting there with the parents and sending bios and they were saying, you know, we are, at that sense, it worked because they felt that their children were remembered. Did I achieve anything? And we had the memorial concert. I think so. It was about remembering and memory and recognition. I don't think it's had any success beyond that in terms of the larger, does it change how we respond or how we react?
Right, in terms of...
And that's enough.
Right, I think there is some success there, so raising awareness.
So I wouldn't say success. I would say, and maybe if you're a parent, you understand this, that you're being named. And I said it in my first tweets, people asking, why is naming important? If you're an African, if you have a child, your naming ceremony, how you name, which name you pick, there's a certain reason why naming things and places and events is important. So for me, that we named was important. Success, I don't know.
Let's just talk about digital activism in a sort of broad sense as to how it can help Africa, how it can, you know, many of our countries are, you know, we're struggling with sort of fledgling democracies and sometimes no democracy at all.
Third term.
I mean, there's a tendency for people who look from afar, particularly people of such older generations, to just go, you're just on your cell phone or you're typing out hashtags. It doesn't really do anything. I mean, what's the argument you come back with to people like that?
I think, I don't know, I even hate sometimes that I'm referred to as an activist. I see myself very much as a concerned citizen of the world. So I don't wake up thinking, I'm going to be an activist with a hashtag. What preoccupies me now, as a mother, and I talked about this in my TED Talks almost 10 years ago, what preoccupies me now is what kind of future do I want to leave for my children? Those of us who were sitting on a table talking about the days of Moi and Biwott, where, you know, if Biwott was even passing by where you are, everyone like took off from the venue and you couldn't crack jokes about people. And many of us left Kenya to find our futures or to live our dreams or just for space, frankly. Right. Yeah. I left for space because I just thought I'd be so smothered in this. There was no future for me. So I am preoccupied not with activism. I'm preoccupied with wanting my children to not have to leave Kenya to find their space. And that's at a personal level. I also know many people who aren't as fortunate as I was, who are much smarter, much more talented, but because of where they landed, never got to fulfill their potential. And I see whether, you know, I used to be very blasé about this, but I do acknowledge that I model, that sometimes I signal. For instance, when I sensed there was a shutting down of the social media space in Kenya, I became a lot more vocal to show that you shouldn't be scared to speak out. You can be a professional and still care about your country and issues, that they're not disconnected. I criticize, I also commend where it's possible. I work with government where I feel I can make a contribution. But this idea, sieging this space that's ours, is something I refuse to do. And I think, when I move back, everyone is like, are your tweets gonna like calm down? And I can't.
Right.
Because I care. And I care about the space I'm living in, and more importantly, the space that we are creating.
Right.
That it's termed activism, I'm not, again, I see myself as someone who just cares and is a concerned citizen, and I feel I have a responsibility given all that's been given to me, including I'm a product of Kenya, a product of Kenyan schools. I'm a product, very much a product of this environment,
Right.
that I owe it to do more than what I'm doing.
Right. I want to talk about innovation, but first I have to
Is
switch
it,
off
is it time up?
the
We
alarm
lost some time
that we had.
during the
Yeah, we
power
lost some
blackout.
time.
Okay.
I want us to talk about innovation in Africa, innovation, particularly because we're in Nairobi and the, sorry, it's still making noise. Okay.
Turn it off.
Sorry. Okay,
Innovation in alarms.
yeah, exactly. Innovation and alarms. I'm not quite sure what's going on here. Anyway, the thing that I thought was interesting was something that you said the other day about not entrepreneuring, Kenya not entrepreneuring its way out of its problems. What do you think? What do you think the challenge is there?
So I think he's asking about a tweet where I.
Was it that?
Oh,
It's
you.
that one. Okay.
Can't take your phone.
Yep. That's fine.
There we go.
Thank you. So you she was good with technology.
So I think I've been concerned about what I call, we're at an event around entrepreneurship and innovation. So I shouldn't say this, but I will. I'm concerned about what I see as the
Fetishization.
I'm lisping. You know what I mean?
I can't say tweet, and I haven't got braces on.
Yeah, of around entrepreneurship in Africa.
Right.
Yes. It's almost like it's the next neoliberal thing.
Yeah.
Like, don't worry that, there's no power because, hey, you're gonna do solar and innovate around that. And your schools suck, but hey, there's this new model of schooling. And, your roads are terrible, but
Right.
hey, Uber works in Nairobi. That's innovation. And I think in other countries, and I'm stealing from Dr. Wandia Njoya, who, if you don't read her work, you should. During the Greek bailout, no one was telling young Greek people to go out and be entrepreneurs. No one is telling Europe has been stuck at 2% or 1% growth. I don't see any entrepreneurship summit in Europe telling them, go out there and be entrepreneurs. And I feel there's a sense that resilience and, innovate around things, it's like it's distracting us from dealing with fundamental problems that we cannot develop. We can't entrepreneur our way around bad leadership. We can't entrepreneur our way around bad policies. And those of us who have managed to entrepreneur ourselves out of it are living in a very false security in Africa. And that's we say there's growth in Africa, but Africans are not growing. And we have to question, why is there this big push for us to innovate ourselves around problems that our leaders, our taxes, our policymakers, ourselves, to be quite frankly, should be grappling with? It's very sexy,
Yeah.
right? To, do some nice, and I'm the last person who should be talking, right? But I've come to realize, and I've done a few projects, some I can't talk about, some I can or I have, where I've forced myself, and that's what I do now, to get into the dirty work of leadership, of policy making, of sitting with government officials and understanding what is their real environment, why are they so constrained, of working with journalists and understanding why can't they tell those stories you think they should be telling. I think if more of us stepped out of this working around things, it would be an eye-opener. I think sometimes we're running away from dealing with the really hard things. And the same people who are pushing this entrepreneurship and innovation thing are coming from places where your roads work, your electricity work, your teachers are well paid. I didn't see anyone entrepreneuring around public schooling in the US. You all went to public schools, you know, and then made it to Harvard or whatever. You turned on your light, it came on. No one was trying to innovate around your electricity power company. So why are we being made to do that? Our systems need to work. And we need to figure that shit out. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So your point is get the basics right.
We need both.
Yeah.
I think we're being pushed into not dealing with the things that make other folks progress. And I have to question what's happening there.
One of, I think we could do this entire conversation based on your tweets.
No, we can't. That's my alter ego. I don't know who tweets.
But you do spark a lot of great ideas, which is what I meant earlier on. So, you know, switching gears slightly, and talking about innovation, but also talking about the kind of funding of innovation as well. One of your very interesting tweets was one about why aren't more African wealthy families, billionaires, all these people we hear about, why aren't they backing the startups or the companies that are trying to do new things on the on the continent? I mean, what's your gut feel on that as to the reason for that?
I think some of it is a risk, a very real risk, and there are much easier opportunities out there. Right now, you can put your money in the bank, get 10% plus treasury bills. In Kenya, land, you know, or property, that just the returns are so crazy that they're trying to figure out valuation. This is the long-term model, you know, we're going to build up users first before revenue. There's an education element to it. I think second, and I'm grappling with this in a very real way, the fact is, especially for startup capital, it's much easier to do a $10 million deal in Africa today than to do a $1 million deal, even 500,000. The amount of work that you put in fact, business idea, boutique law firms that want to service early stage capital, there's a whole opportunity there. It just takes the same amount of work, time, it's riskier, and so you find by the time you carry someone along all the way who has easy opportunities, it's harder. Third, I think, is a trust thing. Unfortunately, people from outside our continent are more willing to trust and back our entrepreneurs than we are. And we need to ask why. You know, I started off with like, and Kenya is very notorious for this, you know, if you want to be a startup founder in Kenya and raise money, get a white co-founder in Nairobi. That's the truth. I got into a lot of trouble for saying that. But the fact is, you know, if they can raise money from their networks, good for them. Question we should be asking is why can't we raise money from our networks? Why can't the entrepreneurs who are listing and, you know, why are they still buying land like our grandfathers were buying? You know what I mean? Like, we're supposed to be this new African, new thinking, progressive, and you go and talk, I try and pitch, or I try and send entrepreneurs who I mentor to them, and they're asking the same questions my grandfather would have asked about the business. And other people are willing to take that backing. So some of it is a trust. I'll even go lower, and I'm like, not low, higher actually, it's higher. Steve Biko, higher. Self-consciousness, self-love. Like, why don't we love ourselves? And why don't we love each other? I'm at that level now because why don't we back? You know, if you go to Silicon Valley and everyone writes like, oh, Konza, we're going to replicate, underlying that, they love themselves and they love each other. It's hookups all the way through.
Yep.
Here, who's your mother? You know, which school? And I think just lowering those barriers. And I spend a lot of time, sometimes through Twitter, because I can't reach everyone. So a lot of follow my tweets when I tweet about opportunities and so on. Sometimes I mentor, because it's that connection and hooking each other up and backing each other and being there for people. It's much more important than a check. And I'm fascinated by this idea of why we as Africans don't support each other and don't write each other checks. Now, that being said, because I'll be accused of always being negative, there are people who are doing that and doing it very well. Pule from African Angels Network, an absolute star, investment banker, quit to do this full time. He's going to be a billionaire in a few years. Took risk, cares about his entrepreneurs. A few of the Nigerian, shout out to Nigerian, they're way ahead of us on this. Jason Joku, Tayo, Simshagaya, all the tech entrepreneurs who've raised and are doing well are all doing angel funding right now. So every deal we're doing in Nigeria is being backed by Nigerians are co-investing with us. It's not the same in Kenya, hello. So you're seeing, you know, this growing input, but we need more.
Yeah. This is just a small, sort of very practical point on that. As part of that argument about why you should invest, we talk about lack of trust and all the other issues. But if the risk is higher, isn't the promise of the reward also higher? You know, if I had that kind of money, and I went back
so I think there are real opportunities. I think we went through a phase of a lot of hype in the tech space, but it's maturing. And if you look at who's coming in, they're not coming in to throw away money. Yeah. If, for instance, people said e-commerce can't work in Kenya, Jumia is about to clock 2,000 deliveries a day in Nairobi. There is Twiga, a company that I love, in Nairobi that's going to redefine how we do agriculture and urban food. So I think there are real opportunities, and it's not charity, that people who are going to make money, not just in tech. The guys who invested in Brookhouse just exited. When it says for an undisclosed amount, you know, somebody got paid. So there are real opportunities here, not just risk.
It looks like we've run out of time. I do want to squeeze in one last question though about the state of news media, and just because I care about that, but particularly the state of news media. I mean, news media on the continent, and I know you had some interesting views on that last time we spoke.
Look, I think I was very skeptical about Quartz Africa launching. He knows this, Omar knows this, because I think we're struggling for content that we can connect to. And I said, I know you're doing well because there are very few links that I scroll through on Twitter nowadays that I favorite to read later, which never really happens.
Thank you.
Or that I open a tab, but I'm actually opening your links. So you're doing well. I think there's an opportunity. There's an opportunity. It is true. I'm not just. They didn't write me a check. I promise. They should. GE should write me a check. Actually.
That's better.
No. But I think that there is. If you look at what's this guy in the U.S. now, The Daily Show, Trevor Noah. You know, Kenya alone, you don't even have to edit a show. Like, Kenya News is a whole daily show without any editing, like none. You just said this is what happened, and you're like, oh, this is hilarious. And with the growth of video, you know, I've been observing, I watch a lot when I move around, all the young people on video now. There's a hunger for news and content that connects to the next generation of Africans that no one is connecting with, and for investigative journalism. And it's tough, right? Because there's legacy, all the issues everyone else is grappling with. At Omedia, we're trying to fund and seed more media innovation, and my role now is to try and bring other funders to come along with us, because I think there's opportunity, especially around digital. But the gap I see is that no one is speaking to young Africans in the way that they would like to, and communicating and engaging with them. And there's so much to be told. Yeah. Well,
if there is anyone who will engage with young Africans and
it's not me.
raise, it is Ory Okolloh. Ladies and gentlemen, please, thank you.